What's up, everyone? Zero here. Welcome back to the channel. We are back with another episode of the podcast. This time I sat down with BuffaloBaron. Awesome dude. I really appreciate the support that this podcast has been getting, so thank you guys. If you guys want to further support the channel, all the links are down in the description. The Patreon, you can join the YouTube channel, or you can just go follow me on Twitch. I am live 6 days a week. So with that being said, let's get into the episode. For people who don't know who you are, can you introduce yourself and tell them how you got into POE?
Sure, happy to. I go by the handle BuffaloBaron. I've got a small to mid-sized YouTube channel. And I originally got into Path of Exile it was late 2019. So it was like right before the whole COVID pandemic thing happened. And this was the game that I was looking for without knowing it. I had been bouncing between action RPGs, ARPGs, looter shooters, Diablo clones of all shapes and sizes, MMOs even too. Just like I had this sense, like I knew I was looking for something that I could really sink a lot of time and even study, like understanding into, like really just throw myself into it completely. And I put dozens, hundreds of hours into a bunch of these different games, the Borderlands and the Outriders, even Anthem, Fallout 76. I tried them all. Tried Last Epoch when it was available. All of them. Diablo 3, of course, I was on for a while. But then I tried I think it was December of 2019, middle of Metamorph League 3.09. The first league that we had, the Conquerors of the Atlas, Cyrus and his gang. I tried that out, and I knew, like by the end of Act 1, I was like, this is it. Mm-hmm. This is what I've been looking for. So I bounced off of it for a league or two, like getting a fair chunk into the end game, but like a lot of new players, it's hard. It's really hard as a new player, and you feel accomplished just to like get halfway into maps, like get to your yellow tier maps at that phase. And I knew that I would get better as I learn more. You just see this mountain of information that you don't yet know. And then when it really clicked for me was late spring, early summer that year when Harvest League came out. And I know that in hindsight, people complain about Harvest having been too much of what they called an item editor. And I feel like people were thinking about that from the perspective of like the super top tier dudes who knew what to do and could manipulate that system at will. But the original 3.1 Harvest, for a player like me who was just kind of breaking into like wanting to do end game bosses and stuff, it was a godsend for helping me understand more of the modifiers, get more of the stuff I needed. And I've been running since then. It was a year or two ago now that I actually started that kind of posting educational content, build guides, farming guides. Once I felt like I personally had enough of a handle that I had something reasonably intelligent to say.
Right. I started in Trials of the Ancestors, but I tried it. I ran my head into a wall because I'm very stubborn. I won't accept outside help for anything. I mean, it's just the way I am. And then until I fail like completely. And I gave up during Toda, and then I came back in Affliction, and I followed a build guide, and then I did a Ice Shot Deadeye. It was the first build I played with the one that uses a Zenith's, the helmet that procs the bow skill, and I'd use it with Hydrosphere, and yeah, it was really fun, dude. I like that a lot, and Lightning Warp. And so I'm not familiar. What was the Harvest mechanic?
Oh yeah, no, happy to describe. So Harvest originally was very different than what it is right now. Putting aside the actual, like the little mini game that you had to do, there was all these jokes and memes with good reason. That how you actually interacted with Harvest was kind of a pain in the ass. It was like a Sim City Farmville or whatever, kind of like you were managing these plots. The same like King's March, how you go back and King's March is like a consistent place that you go to and it remains there. Harvest was like that, but you were managing all these different little plots. But the crafts that we had at that time, number one, they were completely tied to your account. There was no trading life force. That didn't come till much later.
Oh, okay.
So you had to get your own life force. I think at the time, God, now this is digging into my memory, there were seeds. You could buy seeds from other players, but then the monsters that grew out of them were semi-random, and like you had to go fight them yourself in order to get this. So there's a lot more personal involvement in the process.
Way, way different than it is now.
Lots different. Yeah. It has been streamlined. And I think, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think the general consensus is, although the power of it is reduced, the convenience and the understandability of it is so vastly improved that I think most of us are like, yeah, fair hit. Like I think as reasonable as it is now. But at the time, there was stuff like you could target, remove modifiers and add modifiers on and just do it over and over again. I mean, it was a 6 mod item editor. Like you probably played Necropolis, I imagine, right?
Yeah.
Pretty comparable. Like the mechanics of how you did it were different, but the result was the same, that if you just had enough time and currency you could throw out, you could make the item that you wanted. So a lot of that obviously got toned down. A lot of the more obscene options can no longer be used with influenced modifiers, which they could probably go back on that, because at the time that they banned that, the ability to do influence mods, that was before Eldritch influence was a thing. And so influence mods like the classic Crusader, Shaper, Elder, all that stuff, they were the name of the game back then. So it was incredible. I remember what I did was I had a chest with the Crusader Explodey mod on the chest, which is nuts, and monocost of socketed skills for Cyclone to turn it into a 0-cost skill, basically. And it was ridiculous. So I mean, I fully admit that it was overpowered, but it was cool.
That's how they are sometimes, right? I mean, some of those items in Necropolis were absolutely ridiculous. So, I mean, I'm assuming it's been like that from time to time throughout the leagues. But yeah, so we have your. What I wanted to do is similar to the last episode with that I did with Butsy, and just go over your POB and kind of how you came to build this character. Kind of if you can explain the interactions in it, and let me pull up the screen real quick. So I have your Arc Ignite Elementalist, right? It's an Ignite build, correct?
Perfect.
Okay.
Yep, that's a good one to look at. Yep.
Okay, cool. So let's go over to the skills. We'll probably start on the, if you want to start walking me through the offense of the build and just kind of break it down for me.
Sure. And this is actually a good opportunity to kind of talk through some of the thought process of, like, in designing a build, right. How do you even get to the stage of deciding on the offense? So, the number of different ways that will occur to me to start a build can be anything. It may be a particular skill or item or class, or even just like a cool little package of interactions occurs to me, and then I try to build around that. In this case, I had two kind of criteria in my head when I was looking around for what I was going to do with this. Number one, I had it in my head that I wanted a big, fat, juicy ignite. I wanted a skill that could act as a vessel to deliver that one big punch that you need to deliver a good ignite. So for any newer players who are not familiar, ignite is a game mechanic that it is a damage over time for fire, and the amount of damage over time you do is based on the strength of the hit that causes it, with a few little caveats and mechanical little things. But by and large, the idea is that one big hit, and then you get damage over time for several seconds. So things like attack speed, cast speed, they're not quite as important. They're still good for fishing for a higher damage ignite to override your existing one, but you can kind of hit and run, and it's okay. So I had it in my head, I wanted one of these very high damage, even if it was mechanically slightly clunkier, whatever that might be, skills, just do a big heavy hit, because Ignite is a skill that proliferates very well, in a sense that you deal damage or kill one enemy, and that spreads out and hits a bunch around it. Ignite's particularly good at that. So that's thing number one, Ignite. Thing number two is I had it in my head that I was looking for my new player guide. I wanted to be able to create something that I could walk a new player through from Act 1, Level 1 on the beach, and get them straight through to endgame. So had both of those things in mind. And I looked around for a lot of different skills that might be the vessel. And when looking for that, there's a few things you keep in mind. So normally you'd be looking for a fire skill, but as an elementalist, you can see if you look at the Shaper of Flames, Ascendancy Notable, we're not necessarily restricted by that. All damage can ignite if you take the Shaper of Flames node. You don't have to start with a fire spell. So that broadened the horizons a bit. But in looking around, I found that as much as I tried to avoid it, Arc was one of the best ways to deliver both a big punch to a single enemy, and because of the way the Arc skill itself works, also screen clear, proliferation, that kind of stuff. Because the way it works is that if there's only one enemy around, the first enemy it hits will take this big multiplier for however many chains that the Arc would have had afterwards. But if there are other enemies around, then it chains to them, and sure, it deals a little bit less damage, but usually when there's a bunch of enemies around, a little white mob, trash anyways, so you don't care. The reason I say it was unfortunate and I tried to avoid Arc being the one is because there are these connotations for an Arc Witch, an Arc Elementalist. There was, for those who are not aware, several years ago, the most popular new player recommendation for a build, in the way that Pox's Righteous Fire is, for good reason, religiously suggested. Anybody shows up to a Reddit thread, to a Discord, to a stream or whatever, what build should I run as a beginner? Everybody says Pox Righteous Fire. For many years, it was Enki's Arc Witch, his Arc Elementalist. He is incredible. He had this incredibly detailed guide. Didn't just walk you through what the skill was, but what items you were taking. He would walk you through why, and he'd walk you through the game mechanics. He's really good. So I didn't want it to seem like I was riding his coattails, but at the same time, I was like, mathematically, this is, I think, the best skill, or near on the best skill for what I'm trying to do. And Ignite is very different than he ever played it. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to do it anyways. So I started kind of poking around. That's a stage at which I at least looked at POE Ninja. I didn't set out to copy any specific build, and I didn't, but you always want to see, like, what are people doing, the little pieces of tech, the little interactions that people are doing. And one thing that caught my eye that wound up being the focus of the build, this is not exclusive to Arc, but it happens to work well with it, is this interaction looking at the item screen with Nebulous, the Scepter, Melding of the Flesh, the Cobalt Jewel, and Incandescent Heart, the Saintly Chainmail Chest. These are like the big three of the build, and the whole idea is you are overcapping, maxing out your resistances at 90% for all of them, which, number one, is awesome for tankiness, and number two, lets you double dip on the Nebulous mods if you convert that lightning damage to cold, because it says 20% increased lightning damage per resistance above 75 and 20% cold damage per resistance above 75. So if you've got both of those at 90 and you're converting one to the other, effectively, this scepter can read upwards of 600% increased damage, which is awesome.
Wow. Okay.
It practically solves your increased damage section of your kind of damage calculation by itself. There's other stuff that we include, just things that are really efficient, like the Sadist notable on a large cluster jewel, things that would be crazy to pass up. But as you've talked about in several other episodes of your podcast with folks, you do get to the kind of diminishing returns, drop in a bucket point where, like, all right, I've got my increased section sorted out. Let's look at my more multipliers, my dot multi, the other things that you need. So I started with this idea of the triple conversion. Now, when I initially built this out, it was truly triple conversion. I went lightning to cold by using 2 Call the Brotherhood rings. And if you quality those rings up, you can get up to 96% of lightning converted to cold. So you get almost full benefit out of the Nebulous. Not quite, but almost. And then at the time, the Elementalist Shaper of Flame node had a line that said, if the majority of damage is fire, even though it doesn't need to be fire to cause an ignite, if it is fire, the majority of it, you get this big damage bonus. So you are incentivized to use the cold to fire support gem. Now, that's been taken away. Elementalist no longer has any element-specific bonuses to Shaper of Flame, Storm, or Winter. It just has all-purpose bonuses, which are so good. Like, you get this great defensive bonus now as part of Shaper of Flames. With they convert some of the fizz damage to fire. But there is still, in certain phases of this build, before it reaches its super duper endgame state, there are still phases where the cold to fire support gen is a good mathematical decision. Like it's just mechanic. It's really good if you're doing a bunch of cold damage, being able to do a bunch of cold as extra fire. And the big thing enabling that and making it good is that third piece that I talked about. We talked about too, nebulous for the increased damage, melding to get your resistance. The third big piece is the incandescent heart. It is very rare anymore, as I think maybe Lighty pointed out in one of your podcasts, very rare anymore to get true double dipping. But we get it. This is one of those rare cases where we do get it, where Incandescent Heart says gain 20% of elemental damage as extra chaos damage. That does take place at each conversion step. So the skill starts as a lightning skill. You get 20% of that lightning as extra chaos. You convert it to cold. You get 20% of the cold as extra chaos. You convert some big chunk of it. You never end up converting all, but a big chunk to fire, and you get 20% of that as extra chaos as well. So it's really strong. That's basically like flat damage, all of which still contributes to the ignite because of that Shaper of Flames node. So it's still good, even though the Elementalist lost that offensive bonus for Shaper of Flames. There are times when using Cold to Fire and doing the full triple conversion is warranted, although in later iterations you go away from that and you use kind of just numerically superior support gems.
And for people that don't know, conversion only goes one way, correct?
Bingo. Now, this is different than PoE 2 for any of my PoE 2 players watching, where you can get like lightning damage as cold and cold as lightning and this and that. In PoE 1, and I think the wiki might have a little mini graphic on POEWiki.net, but it only goes one direction, exactly as you say.
Yeah, I have it pulled up on the screen right here.
Awesome. So it should hopefully, I hope I won't get it wrong. Fizz can go to lightning. Lightning can go to cold. Cold can go to fire. Fire can go to chaos. You can skip a step at any point. You could go straight from Fizz to chaos. You could go from Fizz to cold or to fire, but you can't go backwards, like you say. So the way that this build is set up is maximizing that. We don't need to go backwards because we start as lightning. We go Fizz. Well, we don't go Fizz. We don't start at Fizz. We start as lightning. We go to cold. Then we go to fire. Then we even go some to chaos. So yeah, okay. Absolutely.
Cool. I just wanted to touch on that just in case, people weren't aware
That's
how that actually works.
Great point. And let's see, I know we want to probably wrap this section up. So just other offensive stuff important to the build. Obviously, this league, mercenaries, this build functions fine without mercenaries, but I'm not going to, they're a huge boost, right? Like, it'd be crazy not to take advantage. So on mine, I've got some defensive stuff, Garb the Ephemeral, Comms Binding Belt. We can talk about that. We talk defenses. But for offense, it's just really nice to be able to offload some of your curses to the mercenary. Mm-hmm. It's smooth for one thing. Like, you don't constantly have to be dropping an Arcanist brand to cast your curses or just manually casting them yourself. Just make sure your merc has a skill that has a lot of coverage, like a kinetic blast or whatever, and they get cursed. No problem.
So you're just doing that via curse on hit rings, or okay?
Yep. There's a few ways you can do it. You can do a curse on hit on a wand, on a ring. You can do it as a glove corruption. So I think right now I've got my guy has temp chains get automatically applied by Azanas, gentle touch gloves without a corruption. And I think I put an elemental weakness corruption on it. And you just have to make sure that in the same way that you would raise your own curse limit to make sure that all those curses can apply, you do have to give the mercenary some way of applying all those curses.
Like anathema or something like that? Yeah.
I think my current version does indeed have. Pretty sure that's.
Yeah, so just in case people don't know what that is, I'll pull it up. It's just your curse limit is equal to your power charges, to your maximum power
Super
charges.
Strong.
Yeah.
Super strong, because your max power charges by default is 3, and it's easy to add them. So.
Yeah.
And then just you can do things with the merc on this build, like Covered in Ash, which is a specific debuff that does a generic thing. Enemies take more fire damage, and it's a multiplier that occurs near the end of the damage calculation, meaning that it gets multiplied on top of everything else. So Covered in Ash is a really good bonus that you can get from a couple different sources. You can get it from Zoth's Amulet. You can get it from, Polaric Devastation Ring. There's a few ways to get it. I don't even know if I'm current doing it. I'm using, the Crown of the Tyrant. Mm-hmm. That drop from all of Crystal King. Just adds a bunch of flat damage and makes enemy resistance negative. It's really, really good.
Yeah,
So good.
that's a really good item for
Yeah.
minions especially.
Yep, definitely. And also, I'll wrap up saying that I guess two things. Number one, exposure and lowered resistances, which is the effective exposure, is a big focus of the build. Many versions of the build either have me or my mercenary wearing Eye of Malice, which applies a 1.5 times multiplier to the enemy's resistance. Bad if their resistances are positive. Very good if you get their resistances into the negative,
Right.
which with exposure on hit, you always do. Even against something like the Uber Maven, you are gonna get the resistance into the negative. The only way that you're not is if you're taking some really stupid alter mods that you know that you shouldn't be. But that's very avoidable. And then new this league. The last thing is the new this league. Golems are the big hotness this league because they're super strong. I was dubious whether I was going to incorporate them. I was worried about for a beginner friendly build guide. Do I pivot at the beginning of the league on this thing that I've established for almost a year? And do I pivot on day one, literally day one of the league? But the reports that were coming in from the people who took that golem node were like, dude, you should do this. And yeah, there's no question they're so good.
Yeah, from what I understand, it's like 100% busted. I have not messed with it at all this league. I tend to play kind of the same builds, but I play a lot of them. But I've never played a Golem build, so this made me really interested when I saw that they had changed this. So I'll probably end up playing one before the POE2 league comes out and Last Epoch releases. But yeah, everybody said it's 100% busted.
What's crazy about it is you don't even make a golem build per se. Like this is just an arc build. This is not a golem build. The
Right.
golems are basically four additional auras that are just following along behind you. It's you barely even think about them except for the fact that they contribute to the screen clutter. Oh well, what are you gonna do?
Right.
But like chaos golem for a bunch of dot multi, stone golem for armor and energy shield. Your choice of mod reduction, cast. There's a lot of great stuff. So I'll wrap on that. The build is good on offense.
So I wanted to ask you. Let me take this out real quick. So as far as the support gems for Vol Arc, how did you come to picking these? Is this just the best DPS that was there, or is there like anything specific like the interactions with the support gems for Arc?
Great question. Really great question. And 90% of the time when I'm theory crafting a build, the answer is literally just I make sure that at the bottom left of the support gem screen where it says sort gems by DPS, I make sure that it says full DPS. And I make sure that the skill I'm trying to scale has include in full DPS checked as a box. And then I literally just click the drop down and see, okay, what does POB think the best for me right now would be? Now, important caveat, that's going to change over time. It's going to change as you get a different weapon. It's going to change as you get different cluster jewels, as you get different portions of your damage calculation from other places. The behind the scenes math, it shifts subtly. So it's always worth revisiting and coming back and seeing, okay, is this still the best option for me? I do a nervous tick. I come back here every once in a while after I change a couple things. And what you can do is you can hover over one of the checkboxes for what would happen if you turned off a support gem, and you can see what would the impact on total DPS on full DPS be. And I look for, all right, what would be the one that would have the least impact if I just deleted it from the build? And I click on it and I see, is there anything better that could replace it? But you're right, it's not just that. There's a couple important caveats to that. And once upon a time, you might want to be careful with something like awakened deadly ailments. Right? So deadly ailments is cool. It gives a ton more damage with ailments, poison, ignite, all that good stuff. But it deals less damage with hits. Normally you don't care. You're like, the more damage to ailments more than makes up for the fact that we're doing less damage with hits. We're not scaling hits. All we care about for the hit is how much damage it would have done to proc the ignite. So normally that's no problem. Unless you've got something else that your build is trying to do that cares about the damage of the hit. And you might care about the damage of the hit for inflicting a good, beefy shock. The good news is, this league, they also buffed up Shaper of Storms, so that by default, your baseline shock, even if you're dealing like two damage of any kind, you still inflict this outlandishly high shock. And when you scale things like increased effective shock, increased effective non-damaging ailments, when you've got that node allocated, you're scaling it where the baseline is that new big, beefy, chunky shock, and you only go up from there. So this build no longer has to care about the damage of the hit. We can fully care about damage over time. So deadly ailments is one that you wouldn't like necessarily 100% of the time take. You got to think about it, but we're cool to take it here. The other one, and you may notice this is not a mistake. The POB that I sent has awakened unbound ailments not checked. I hope it does. If
No,
it's checked,
it was unchecked. I thought I unchecked it at first, and then I checked it.
Nope.
So,
and I'm glad I
thank
drew
you for
attention to
clarifying that. Yeah.
This was the result of a lot of discussion and experimentation in my Discord server, and actually tracked down some bug threads on the Path of Building, like the community fork forums where they track bugs with the program. And you can actually look in the configuration page, sorry, go into the custom modifiers, and in the custom modifiers, I've got the text of unbound ailments in there, but done in such a way that it gets around a little bug that was occurring with the effect of non-damaging ailments, right? So this is what I was just talking about a minute ago with beefing up the effect of your shock. The shock is not an ailment that deals damage directly, right? It puts a multiplier on the enemy. It's very potent, but it causes them to take increased damage. What appears to have been happening, and still happening as far as I know, with Path of Building, this is speculation, but it's like educated speculation. What appears to have been happening is that Unbound Ailments was treating itself too literally. So it was saying supported skills have increased effect of non-damaging ailments, and POB was making what I think is the error, backed up by my in-game experience. I think this is an error of assuming that the shock was caused by the ascendancy node, not by the skill gem. But that's not how it works in POE 1.
Right.
That might be how it works in POE 2, don't know. But in POE 1, even though the shock effect is being set manually by the ascendancy, it's still the skill gem that's doing the effect. So we were tearing our hair out. Well, some of us proverbially, but we were tearing the proverbial hair out, trying to figure out what was going on with awakened unbound ailments. And it turns out it was not applying effect of shock. So if you tweak the wording slightly to make it an all-purpose and put it in the custom configuration and just say increased effective non-damaging, that appears to accurately simulate what the game is actually doing with your shocks. I mean, you can test it. You can see what number of shock winds up on an enemy, and it looks accurate to what we're calculating here. Okay. And this is an important case where you can't just blindly trust whatever the drop-down tells you is the best, because it does not think Unbound Ailments is the best. But if it knew that we were really improving the shock that we were dealing, it would know that this is, in fact, a very good choice. There's actually a good argument for taking this mechanically, even if it was slightly subpar from a DPS perspective. Duration of ailment, it wildly increases the duration of Ignite. And it's important for a few reasons. One of which is just like if you're in a danger, you don't want to be standing still just casting your arc and letting the boss hit you with whatever. You want to be able to fire and flee, fire and forget. And then the next reason is a very potent damage multiplier for a damage over time build, including an Ignite build, is this modifier. Damaging ailments deal damage faster, or Ignites deal damage faster. It's just what it sounds like. Whatever damage you would have dealt over 5 seconds, all the other modifiers that you've got to your damage, it suddenly condenses that down to 4 seconds. It's an enormous multiplier on your damage to deal it faster, but the Ignite does expire faster, so you can get yourself into a situation if you take too many of those mods where your Ignite isn't even lasting a second.
And you're talking about duration of ailment on the tree, right? Not as like a gem, right? Or support?
Both. So some of it,
if you put more duration, would that affect the Ignite at all or no?
That's a good question. I wouldn't do that for damage reasons. It might. I'd have to look it up. I've never scaled directly, like just straight up more duration, less duration for ailments. I've only ever done it in the sense of, because I think even if you could, the numbers on this would be more potent. Like 79% increased duration of ailments. Where are you going to get 79% increased just generic duration? That'd be crazy. Like every build would love that.
Right.
So I've only ever done it. Yeah, it's a good question. But you don't want to be in a situation where your ignite is lasting under a second. Number one, because you're going to have damage downtime. And number two, because there is this property of the damage where it's got a roll range, right? Sometimes it rolls a little lower, sometimes a little higher. So you fish for a good ignite. You fish for that really high damage, juicy one at the upper end of the roll range, and the game will always prioritize whatever the highest damage active ignite is. Only one can be active at a time, but it gives you the benefit of the doubt. So it is in your interest to be able to have an ignite up for like 6 seconds, because then when you hit that really crisp one at the top of the damage range, you have that up for 6 seconds while you run around and try and get another juicy one. So this can have a kind of hidden impact on the DPS that isn't always really apparent when you look at POB.
Right. So just so people don't know, the way that the ignite works, can you run that down for people? Just like as far as if you do more damage, it will override the last ignite that did less damage. Is that accurate in saying that?
Yep. There are two kinds of damaging ailments. One of which they add up all together. Poison. So just as many poisons as you can get onto an enemy, they're all doing something. All of them. Ignite is different. Only one at a time. But the game, let me rephrase. More than one ignite can be on an enemy. The game tracks it in the background. Only one of them can be dealing damage to the enemy, and the game will always choose the highest one. So if I've got an ignite going for 4 seconds, let's say, and it's doing 2 million DPS, and then about halfway through that 4 seconds, I get one for 6 million DPS. Well, that 6 million one, I don't know if the range would ever be that high. Just roll with me. That one will take priority for 4 seconds, and you have 4 seconds to get another big juicy one, or else whatever the next highest one that you got in the interim will take over. It's not as complicated as I'm making it sound. It's just the game giving you the benefit of the doubt of whatever you've done recently that has the best damage. It'll give you that for your damage over time.
Okay. Cool. So what else offensively in this build did you decide to go with? So obviously you got your auras up. Can you walk us through that? What the auras are doing? So you have you have Malevolence, you have Tempest Shield, Purity of Ice. Obviously that's going to be for your resistances.
Purity of Ice is a low-key underrated. Players undervalue that when they switch over to Nebulous. It is an underrated off buff. You need Purity of Ice in this build because it contributes to your max cold resistance, and via melding of the flesh, cold resistance is how we're scaling all of our maximum resistances. Cold is the intuitive best option because this is an Aegis Aurora build that is a shield that, among its other excellent effects, happens to come with 5 maximum cold resist. So just by default, you're already 5 up towards your goal of 15 to go from 75 to 90. It's a no-brainer to do cold. So Purity of Ice, huge for defense, huge for offense. Can't do without it. As I tell everybody who plays this build, please don't let me catch you switching over to Nebulous with anything less than 85% to all of your resistances, because I guarantee you're going to be giving yourself a DPS decrease if you're doing that. So that's a big one. Malevolence is kind of a no-brainer as well. It's the damage over time aura. It just reads more damage over time. The skill effect duration is nice too. You know what? We can just check. This is easy. I'm just going to check the ignite duration real quick and see if that's contributing. No, it is only ailment duration that contributes to ailments and generic skill effect duration. Okay, I'm glad we checked. But it's good for other things or other duration-based. It affects curses. It affects things like Sigil of Power, which, it creates this big circle that you stand in and it improves your damage. All those are great things that you'd love to be up for longer. So Malevolence is no-brainer. Just to stick on offense, I guess. Like I said, I kind of treat my golems as offensive auras in a way, reservation-free auras, because the golem node causes them to resummon themselves if they die, and they're completely immune to elemental damage, and they have my determination aura, and enemies are converting a lot of their fizz to elemental anyways. Basically, they're not dying very often, and when they do, they come right back. So it's kind of fair to treat them as most of an aura. So you get lightning damage for cast speed, and the big thing it gives us is mana regen. This build can have mana problems, or it could before golems entered the build. Now, mana is pretty easy to manage, so that's big. Chaos Golem, it gives you the defense of chaos resistance in the early version of the build before we go chaos inoculation and become totally immune to chaos. It's very handy to have that chaos res, but we keep it around because it's got a great damage over multiplier. Stone Golem is my favorite of all the additions. Regen, which we convert from life to energy shield with Zealot's Oath, and more importantly, increased defenses. This applies to evasion, which we do not take, but it applies to energy shield and armor, which we very much do take. And this makes defenses so trivial with this build. I know we're talking offenses, but I can't help but just talk about Stone Golem is so good. This makes it so that you can switch to Chaos Inoculation with a decent energy shield pool in like yellow maps and not even think twice about it. Nobody could have done that last league with this build. We were well into red maps before we were. So anyways, those are the Golems. I've got my... all of my Merc stuff is the stuff that is not in a specific socket set. The haste, vulnerability, elemental weakness, temp chains. So 3 curses, and the Merc has the haste aura. The haste aura, I think, is the thing of the Mercs. Never mind all the curses and stuff. I can manage that part on my own. The haste thing, I think, is probably the one that's going to hurt the most when Mercs inevitably either go away or at least get totally nuked from orbit by nerfs, and like deservedly. But man, that haste feels so good. It feels like you have Mage Blood before getting Mage Blood. You just run around so fast.
So
which is its own offensive and defense.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I wanted to ask you about Vol Smite. Why is Vol Smite in there? That's for the aura, correct?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question.
Yeah. Can you just explain that real quick, what that does?
On the face of it, Vol Smite is actually a little counterintuitive. If you don't know, Vol skills, these ultimate moves that kind of build up over time, they compete with each other for souls. You need a certain number of souls to use a Vol skill, but you only get so many souls from enemies. And so the fact that I have Vol Arc and Vol Smite means that they kind of compete with each other. Vol Arc is very potent. It's just got way more damage. Just think of it that way. Vol Arc is a must-have for the build for all kinds of situations. It's more damage, better clear. Everything about it is better. So you use that whenever you need it. Vol Smite, you're like, why do you take that and make it so that you're casting Vol Arc less often, like objectively, mathematically less often? The answer is yes. Both the normal version of Smite and its Vol version add an aura to you for... This is one of the things Malevolence helps, like upwards of 10 seconds skill effect duration. It just adds flat lightning damage to everything you do, attacks and spells. And that's big for us. We love flat damage in this build. It's one of the ones that's a little harder to get. We've got our increased sewn up, more, dot, multi, all that sewn up. So like increases the flat damage at the very beginning of the damage calculation. Love it. Now, I don't use a regular Smite. It's on the gem. I don't use it. Why? Well, regular Smite can whiff. It can fail to hit, and you only get the bonus if it hits. My build does not scale accuracy in any way. There's no space for it. I wouldn't want to do it. And so you're going to whiff like half the time. Vol Smite, it's got a cannot be evaded mod built right into it. So not only does it give more flat damage than the normal Smite aura, but it never misses. So, yep. Also, the other thing to note is actually, I don't have Vol Smite in all the time. I could fit it in. I could shift some things around, but I don't feel like it. I'm lazy. It just comes down to that. So what I do is I've normally got shield charge in that slot for mobility, charging around the map, and it's linked to faster attacks, right? Okay. Well, when I get to a situation where I'm pretty much standing still most of the time, a lot of bosses, I'm doing the like super juiced blight farming kind of stuff, I don't need to move around a lot. So I put Vol Smite in the place where shield charge would be. I just have it in my inventory and just chuck it in. And then it is helped by faster attacks. It's a pretty slow attacking skill, so it feels nuts to have that. But then, yeah, I just, every once in a while, throw that down, get a bunch of damage. It's nice.
Yeah, I was, when I first started, a lot of builds would have that. And I had no idea why. I was like, why do they have Vol Smite in their build? Because, you know, it's not explained. So
I am not a POB warrior, so you and I hope the audience will note that when I disseminate this POB, I do not have Smite or Vol Smite checked, and I only have Sigil of Power at stage 0 or 1. Like, this is a dot cap build. This is a 36, 37 million DPS build. It shows as 18.7 mil in this version because I'm not doing vol smite all the time. That's a pain in the ass. I'm not running around every 7 or 10 seconds doing a vol smite. I don't need to. 18 mil for mapping, it's fine. It's more than fine.
And that's an important thing to touch on too, is you can go in the configuration tab in POB whenever you're looking at somebody else's build, and you can tell if you look at things like under skill options where you have sigil of power stages, because every time you increase this, it's going to make the DPS go up. A lot of people, and I don't really know what the point of doing that is, but a lot of people do put POBs out there with like fake, like things that boost their damage. I don't know why they do that. It's like, because when people put the build
I have a couple
together,
speculations, but rather than get into,
right.
I'd love to speculate on why, but I think the important note, like you say, is just be aware of it.
Right.
Be aware that it's out there. We don't need to cast any personal aspersions. Maybe it's just a mistake. I've done it by mistake before, right?
Right,
I've accidentally sent a POB around where I forgot to uncheck a thing. And when it's called to my attention, I'm more than happy to be like, oh, you're totally right. Let me uncheck that.
Right.
But yeah, new players should just be aware there's an element of critical thinking here, which is tough when your game knowledge is, you're still building it. You're still building your game knowledge, but there's an element of, you look at this, you go, all right, he says he has power charges. Do I detect a way of getting power charges on this build? That's an easy one to fake. I'm whatever, make a mistake on.
Right.
Totally.
So let's go through the offensive part of the skill tree. What are you doing here that affects offenses? How did you come to making the decisions that you did with the skill tree? And I know you had mentioned before that you start with like a skeleton tree when you're building out your builds. Right? Can you walk me through the process of that, just for people that are
Sure.
maybe that'll be beneficial for people who are trying to do the same thing?
Definitely. I regret to report, spoiler alert in advance, that a lot of what I'm going to say comes down to, like I was just mentioning, like there's an element of game knowledge to it. Like there's an element of I've done this 200 times or whatever. And so I kind of I've got that practice built up, like practicing the piano. Like you already just know a couple basic things that you want to go. But I'll start from the beginning and kind of walk through it. Basically, when I'm starting a build, there's any number of on-ramps, like I think I said, that might interest me in a build. I might start with like, I really want a big AOE skill, or I'm sick of dying. I want a tanky build, or I'm really interested in this reworked Hierophant. I want to make use of whatever. Any number of different places I could on-ramp to the build, that I could entry point build. And then if I haven't picked a class at that point, I'll usually do my little round-the-clock round robin. I'll start at 12 o'clock on the POB and just kind of meander my way around looking at all the different ascendants. And I'm at the point in my experience with the game that just looking at it, it's just a visual reminder. I know what they all do. It just helps me kind of focus by looking at them one at a time and just kind of having that association game going on in the background of knowing like what skills would go with this, like what kind of gear would go with this. And I kind of just keep doing that until something piques my interest or doesn't. And if it doesn't, maybe I'll go and I'll pull up a list of like recently introduced unique items from the new league, or new gems, or the rune graphs, and just kind of see if something sparks that kind of clicks together with whatever my initial idea was. So like in this case, God, this one is tough, because this one, you got to remember, I first put this together over a year ago. I've probably had 50 different versions of this POB, to be totally honest, but to best approximate what the process was probably like, let's me and you both go to the loadouts, the upper right-hand corner. For newer players, this is an amazing tool. If the build creator has gone through the effort of doing it, using the loadout drop-down menu at the upper right lets you swap between different versions of the build. So for your tree, your gems, your gear, everything changes all at once. Let's do the mid-budget pre-CI, pre-chaos inoculation, and just look at it.
Okay.
And honestly, what you see here in terms of damage on the tree is like fine. So we can start at the top. I mean, some of this stuff does not make it, and you can compare to the endgame versions of the build and see not all of this stuff makes it to the endgame version. So actually, if you want, at the bottom, we can check that box for compare, which will bring up a second drop-down menu along the bottom. Let's compare mid-budget pre-game CI to cruising altitude, which is just kind of my
cruising altitude for like, fiddling or altitude?
Not the fiddling one. Okay. I shouldn't have sent that one. I'm sorry. Just cruising altitude.
Okay.
And what you see here is everything gets highlighted in red and green to represent the differences between the two versions of the build. You can see things like at the very top, at 12 o'clock, Heart of Flame and the wheel leading up to it are in red because that does not make it to the end game version of the build. Over on the left middle, sort of, there's a red blob in the middle, Stormweaver. Doesn't make it. Obviously, Purity of Flesh, that gives us life and chaos. That's not going to make it because we're going to go to chaos inoculation, stuff like that. But I just wanted to highlight that not everything in the early version winds up in the end. There are things like cluster jewels and stuff that that will take the place of those. They are more point efficient. Yeah, I just wanted to do the comparison to highlight a couple of the things that will change, but we can check off that compare box now and just go back to where we're just viewing the mid-budget endgame pre-CI. So some of the damage things are the Heart of Flame wheel. It's just basic fire damage. The Fire Pen does not help us. Fire penetration, that only applies to fire damage from hits, which we are now scaling. We're scaling fire damage over time. Now, in the middle of that wheel, Breath of Flames, all of that does apply. 30% increased fire damage, 10% fire damage over time multiplier. And I don't mean to beat a dead horse, anybody who's your episodes or who already knows this, but this all comes down to the different buckets of the damage calculation, right? You want to solve a bunch of different buckets. So increased is great, especially before we swap over to Nebulous, which is going to give us a lot of increased. The weapon that I've got before then is the Singularity Scepter, which actually gives a big chunk of increased in its own right. But nevertheless, increased on the tree, still valuable. Like we're not to the point of diminishing returns yet. But the fire damage over time multiplier, you can take that word multiplier literally. It does multiply onto the end of most of the other stuff. Like after you've accounted for flat damage and then multiplied that by increased, multiplied it again by all the sources of more damage, then you get your fire damage over time multiplier. Very powerful.
So, let me ask you a question about the flat damage real quick. So when you are calculating in a build how much flat damage you can dump into this, because you could get real lost in the weeds when you're doing like a skill tree and just keep going increased. And at what point do you stop and you're like, okay, now I need to divert some attention or give some attention to the multipliers now? Or what point do you do that?
That's a really good question. And what's interesting about what's unfortunately a little complicated about it is it's true that there's an opportunity cost component in play, right? Like if you put too much into increased, you are in a way giving up your ability to go somewhere and get a more multiplier or an ignites faster. Here's where it gets complicated. It's usually not a direct substitution. It's usually indirect because these different sources of the calculation tend to come from different places. Now on the tree, you get a lot of increased. Lots of increase all over the tree. You get some sources of dot multi in a vanishingly small number of sources of this ignites faster or ailments faster. There's like a few scattered all over the tree. I think dirty techniques at the bottom of the tree, way out of reach for us. Some people anoint that with their amulet. But those are there, but rare. There are no sources of more damage or flat damage or increased damage taken. But, if you follow the kind of the Rube Goldberg machine of cause and effect of a build, you're still in a way giving things up, right? Because I'm just trying to think of an example off the top of my head. If you over-invest into increased damage on the tree, beyond the point where you should. Well, how do you know that? Well, because you're going to have to give up something like life on the tree, and then either you're dying too much and you can't have that, can't deal damage when you're dead, or you have to give up something on your gear to get that life. And so the substitution might happen at a second or causal, like down the pike, but you will give up something. The cost will be there. Your gems, typically you're choosing for your gems between more and it's usually just more, sometimes speed. I'm trying to think of any gems have like dot multi, but it's not always that you're directly giving up one thing for the next, but you're right. Like there's going to come a point, and that's tough to say when that point is. It's a lot of trial and error. This is why I treat loading up a POB like an artist or an engineer or something, just ripping off the next fresh sheet of paper and kind of scribbling out the next thing. I don't treat, when I'm build designing, I don't treat it as like super concrete until I'm ready to focus. Okay, this is ready for game time. This is ready for prime time. So like I'm willing to go through and do 20 iterations of a POB, and I'll do different gear and I'll do different skill trees. It would be horrifying. I think if people could see my real process, they'd be like, "Oh my God, that's it's a mess." No, it's for me, it's trial and error. I think a guy like who was he interviewed recently that I like? It's gonna bother me. The mechanics. God, Dreamcore, of course, Dreamcore. He's a guy who I've got a fair chunk of this stuff stored in my noodle. He's got way more.
Yeah, he's he's a fountain of information, dude. I just turned on the knob and he just yep. kept going and going. It's pretty awesome.
He's got more of this in my brain, in his brain, than I've got in mine. And so I have a need to do this trial and error thing that maybe some other creators like Jung Ron, incredible at build creation, and I know that he's just got most of the interactions just filed away in his brain. So sometimes I've just got to play with it. I've got to be like, all right, if I take this away, that messes with my mono res efficiency. Can I get an Enlighten? Yes, but then I have to give up a slot, and I give up Sigil of Power, and I lose DPS there, and it's like 10 orders of causality deep, and that's why you just have to iterate, or at least I do. Right. I have to iterate on the process. It's not a clean from point A to point Z. There's, I'm kind of all over, and what I'm willing to present as a guide is the end result of that. I don't want to confuse people and lead them to the weeds. I'm going to say, this is how you should do it. Don't worry about the fiddling that I did for like months to get it to this point. Because right. Yeah, there's so many versions of this. But like when I start, this started with a question of like, I'm jumping into a build for the very first time. What am I going to do? Well, I'm going to say, let's say that I don't want to skip right to the end game version. I want to sketch out a version of the build. It's not Chaos Inoculation. At most, I've got this one little cluster jewel for Enduring Composure for defense. Like I don't, something that you're going to get for 5 chaos. So I'm going to path to the easily available life stuff, because that tree is going to need life. The guidance is you should shoot for around 100% increased life on your tree if you're a life-based build for early endgame stuff. So the easy stuff from a witch starting point is quick recovery, which is great for our mana, heart and soul, cruel preparation up at the top, and purity of flesh. I think if you looked at which life-based builds on day 2 or 3 of a league, the percent that have those nodes taken is enormous. Like not all of them, but a lot. Like these are kind of, from a defensive perspective, kind of no-brainers, so to speak. And then I start in the way that like an artist would over-sketch with the pencil. I'll sketch some damage nodes like Heart of Flame, like Breath of Flames. I'll come over and take Holy Fire, and I'll know in the back of my head, I might take these away later. Not even in the endgame version of the build. I might take some nodes now, and then need to cut back on these later as I realize like, I've got to find some room to get to 2 more jewel sockets, or I've got to find some room to get some more mono res efficiency. So in the same way, like if you look at a pencil sketch of an artist and how they've like kind of overdrawn, and then you kind of like pare it back a bit with the eraser, right. I kind of do a little bit of that. And I'll overdo the damage at first just to get like that initial skeleton of like, what's this going to look like generally if I want to path to the things that I need? Like, do I want to path all the way down Glancing Blows, which is an interesting decision. It's a defensive decision. And do I want to do that at the cost of several points, or do I save that for a later iteration? So yeah, you take these things, or at least I do. This is just my process. This is right for anybody. And then later, if I need to, I kind of pare it back. A lot of that is just knowing like, all right, maybe I have to type in, go to the search box, type in fire or time multiplier, ignite, stuff like that. And just if I don't know where stuff is. Now I'm at the point, having done this build guide and troubleshooting people's builds for like a year for this build, I pretty much know where all that stuff, the fire stuff, is on the tree, no problem. But if I was doing a new build, like if I needed to remind myself where like energy shield regen could come on the tree, I might search that in the box just to kind of get that initial outline, like where might I go at first?
Right. So would you say a good process would be, because I know that that Pox had mentioned this in the previous episode. He said that when he was looking in the very, very beginning, a good thing to be would be look at the tags that would affect your main skill gem. Sure. And then you just pop in the tags into the search bar, and then you can see which side of the tree lights up, and that would kind of guide the decision that they would make with picking what class to pick, you know?
Pox is an incredibly intelligent dude, by the way. Just as an aside, he's another one like Dreamcore that I want a huge shout out to for anybody. The person who's been living under a rock and doesn't know Pox. Amazing. The one little area where I disagree with him on that, and it's not even truly a disagreement because I follow what he's saying and I agree with the general principle. The trouble is the type of player who would need to search for something like lightning or area or something like on the tree is often a newer player. And you're actually the perfect person to talk to about this, because at the beginning of this conversation, you mentioned how you're a player who likes to kind of really beat your head against something and solve it on your own. And as you learned, that's really hard to do in this game. It's really hard to just say, I'm going to take this build from scratch. I'm going to pick a skill, and I'm going to pick a class, and I'm just going to go. And I'm not going to look at anything. Like at most, maybe I'll pull up the wiki if I don't know a word, but I'm not going to ask anybody for help. I'm not going to guide. That's really hard, and hard in a way that I want to express to a new player. If you're watching, you should not feel bad if you hit a wall doing that. It's the most common experience in Path of Exile is start out doing it and to hit a wall. So the only way in which I kind of disagree with Pox is that like that is a good learning experience for a new player to do that. I think it's amazing to play this Path of Building program like a piano and just kind of fiddle around with it. But what I don't want a new player to come away with is the impression that at 300 hours into the game, which is incredibly new by Path of Exile standards, I hate to say that because it sounds ridiculous. True that you're gonna accidentally fiddle your way into an uber boss killer. It's like, it just doesn't, doesn't work that way. And it's disheartening to hear that. I totally understand that's disheartening. But to me, it wasn't. So here, let me tell you why it wasn't disheartening for me, because what that means is that this is a game that you can master with dedication and through learning and through really trying hard over time. You can build this big knowledge base and get there eventually. I didn't want a game that I could master in a month and then be bored and have to go do something else. Right. So to me, it's a plus to hear that you need 1,000 hours in the game before you can start being like halfway decent at putting a build together. But yes, in general, like to just get the rudiments of an idea, to take your baby steps, totally. I am a huge proponent of what Pox talks about there. Just type the tags into the box, get a feel for where stuff is on the tree, do it on the wiki. Go search Ignite on the wiki. There's a great, all the unique items that have anything to do with Ignite. That's how I build.
Big tool, dude. And I don't think a lot of people, well, I'm not a lot of newer players won't know this, but if you search out a mechanic in Path of Exile, you can go down, scroll down to the bottom of the wiki, and it'll show you the items that affect that mechanic.
It is occasionally incomplete in small ways, but by and large, it is the best tool, aside maybe from Path of Building, in the arsenal of a build creator.
Yeah, it's incredible. I love this thing.
Just my arsenal, my little utility belt of knowledge has been built up by just when I start a bit. I'm going to open up Path of Building on one screen and the wiki on the other screen. Yeah. Like my process, the beginning of my process will frequently start with the following, typing into the wiki, in the search bar, list of blank. List of is such a common thing on the wiki. It's almost a keyword. There's list of spell skills, list of attack skills, list of unique swords, list of unique body armors. And I just start with that. And it's just a very process. I just kind of scroll. If I decided, so like I said, when I decided that I wanted to do a big juicy Ignite build, I just typed in list of spell skills on the wiki, and I scrolled down. Now, if you're a player, there's the element where you're probably going to have to click into more of them than I do and get a better feel for what they do, what their effectiveness at a damage and their cast speed and all that stuff is. Those are things that come with time. for me, I'm able to look at most of them and file them away as yes, no, or maybe. Like, absolutely not. That's not even a damaging spell. Yes, that's good. I'm filing that away. Or like, if nothing else pans out, I'll come back and kind of a thing. But yeah, just list of spell skills, list of attack skills. Yeah, I love that. And build up your knowledge.
Yeah, for sure. So let's hop back over to this skill tree. Let's take a turn and do some. Let's talk about some defense on this.
Yeah.
What I'll do is I'll switch back over to the cruising altitude one, if that's okay. Yep. That's the end game version of it, correct?
Yeah. So this is, let's see, is this the one? Yeah, this is the one. Full disclosure. It took me a while into the league to cave in and publish this one. I didn't even want to publish it because it's a mage blood POE, and it's a common complaint, not without good reason, but people will be like, oh yeah, of course. Build can do this. It's mage blood. I held off on this in my defense for quite some time, so I just wanted to put that out there. Yes, this is a build that can take great advantage of mage blood. No, you do not need it. The build can do 8, 9, 10 million DPS before you get that far, but there's no doubt that it is. Listen, it's one of the most popular items in the game for a reason, right. And it's great for the build. So I just wanted to start with that caveat. Yeah. The cruising altitude version is a mage blood build. Where would you like to begin, or would you like?
Well, yeah, man, you just take it away. We can start wherever you want. We can start with the skills that you have for defense. We touched on it a little bit already. You have the determination aura that's given to you by the Aegis. That's on a corruption. You could just start wherever you want.
Sure. So I'm a sucker for defense. I really love a defensive build, and I don't think I've played a Deadeye in years. Like I need a build that at least has the possibility, and I know you can build a tanky Dead if you want. I'm joshing around a little bit there, but I am a sucker for tanky builds, and tanky in Path of Exile means multiple layers of defense that complement one another. They don't just add together; they complement each other in interesting ways. So, yeah, the skills. The fact that I am using determination and discipline is kind of a no-brainer. Determination to give armor. Armor is mitigation for physical hits. So that actually, we should talk briefly. Physical non-hits, that is to say time, is one of the big weaknesses of this and many other builds. It's fairly straightforward to build defense against hits. And even elemental damage over time by overscaling your elemental resistances. But physical damage over time is rough. There's not a ton of direct mitigation for that. So you kind of have to get just immune to corrupted blood. That's one of the big sources of physical damage over time. You just find something either on a jewel or your tree or an item or somewhere that just says immune to corrupted blood. You're no longer worrying about it. Right. The endgame version of this build can get a ring corruption, an implicit modifier corruption that says immune to bleeding. And that covers another, if that brings you up to 85% of physical damage over time, then eliminated from the game. There's just a few niche little skills that monsters do that are physical damage over time that are neither bleeding nor corrupted blood. What comes to mind is that friggin' boss of the Crimson Township map. He's got this outlandish physical damage over time. I hate that guy.
Yeah, so I hate that map, dude. I just hate that map in general.
He's the guy that I kill once I've got enough DPS to just nuke him down. I don't want to deal with him. Anyways, most of the physical damage mitigation is very good in this build because most physical damage comes in as hit-based. Armor is the beginning of that. Actually, that's not even true. The real beginning of that now, this league, is that we are converting a big old chunk of enemies' physical damage to elemental. This is great for us. You can get your elemental damage resistance up to 90 very trivially. Whereas with physical damage resistance, you don't ever want to trust the POB that says that you have 90% physical damage mitigation. No, you do not. You might have 90% damage mitigation against a small to mid-size hit, unless you are rocking millions of armor. You don't have 90% damage mitigation against a Shaper Slam or whatever. But elemental resistance, you can get true 90% mitigation. So with a tool like the new Shaper of Flames, which as long as we've ignited an enemy, their physical damage 40% is converted to fire. What that means in real practical terms is 40% of that physical damage is shaved off the top, turned into fire, and because of some other mechanics that we're going to discuss in a minute, it turns into like 36% delete. We take something like 4 total percent of that, and then 60% remains as physical. That is not just good because it deletes a bunch of that damage, though that's obviously awesome. It's also good because of the way armor works. Armor works better on smaller hits, and this is now considered a smaller hit. It is starting from a smaller physical baseline once we've peeled off a bunch of it and shoved it over to fire. So armor is now not seeing a 10,000 damage hit. Armor is now seeing a 6,000 damage hit. Armor's a lot happier to see that hit.
Right.
That is the kind of hit that can get mitigated by 50, 60,000 armor to a substantial degree. Now that's the Mage Blood amount of armor. I would expect to have 30,000 in the pre-Mage Blood version of the build. But still, like, you're not dealing with Shaper Slams every match. You know what I'm saying? You're dealing with big physical hits, sure, but not 11,000 plus damage plus a crit. So physical mitigation starts with conversion. We are also giving our mercenary, this league only, I'm sure, Calm's Binding Belt. It's the same effect. Fizz converted to fire. Exact same effect. I think it's 25% more. Or is it 20 and then you can quality it up?
It's 20. It's 25 on POB, but that's probably because it's at the max. I set everything to max on it, so max ranges.
But yeah, that adds on. So you're now converting 65% of your physical damage to fire, eliminating the vast majority of that through some means, again, we're going to discuss in a second. And the physical hit starts as a paltry 35% of what it was. Armor is going to treat that as a joke. Right. That's a joke of a hit. And the build has endurance charges, which, unlike armor, which scales with the relative size of the hit, endurance charges just peel off a flat percentage of physical damage regardless. So if the armor gets done with the hit and says, whew, that was too big for me, I'm only able to peel off 10% of that. A smaller hit, I could have done 90%. That was a huge Shaper Slam hit. I'm only able to peel off another 10% of that damage. Well, endurance charges don't work that way. They don't care about that. They're going to say, well, it's 4% per charge. You have 3 charges. We're peeling off 12% of the damage, no matter how big it is. So that's another big element of the physical damage prevention. Having a Fizz max hit of 18,000, 19,000, that's really, really good, just for context. Aegis Aurora is, of course, a quintessential part of this build. Energy shield gained when you block. The amount of energy shield you gain is a percentage of your armor. So the more armor you scale, you're also scaling your recovery when you block. It is good enough recovery that it is even worth taking glancing blows, where you take 65% of damage from blocked hits. That's going to get you killed if you don't have something like Aegis or some other, recover on block method. But we're recovering a ton when we block with Aegis Aurora.
So that's an important caveat, right? As for glancing blows, you need some sort of recovery on block mechanic when you're choosing that notable or when you're choosing that keystone.
At least, look, I hate to be 100% on anything, but I'm sitting here racking my brains when I would want to take glancing blows to take my block from 35% to 70% block, but instead of taking 0% from 35% of hits, I'm now taking 65% of 75% of hits, or 70% of hits. I just don't think the math works out. Maybe somebody in the comments will have a case use, and I'm happy to hear it. But I think by and large, I think as a rule of thumb that may have some exceptions, I wouldn't take glancing blows. This is just a good example of a keystone. I mean, this is how keystones work in Path of Exile. They typically come with an upside and a downside, or some build around restriction. You look at something like Ancestral Bond, you get more totems, but you can't deal damage yourself. It's just something, you don't take a keystone without planning it. Like, you have to know why you're taking it. And for me, I don't take glancing blows unless I have some way of taking advantage of the quantity of blocked hits, because the amount of damage I'm taking from blocked hits is, I'm getting no favors there.
Yep. Cool. Yeah, I just wanted to, I wanted to touch on that just because it looks really good, and then you're like, wait a second, you're still taking 65% of the damage. So
for a long while, it was 50% of damage, and then there was more of a justification for builds taking it even without having recover on block. Like at that point, take % of damage from hits. If you just had good generic recovery, leech, regen, you could kind of power through it. But 65% of damage gets on boards. Like you would need outstanding recovery for this to be worth it, to me. Anyways, I think that the other big thing to talk about defensively is the incandescent heart body armor. Right? Just get ourselves over there. So this guy says, in addition to its offensive benefits of gaining elemental damage as chaos, as we talked about, it also says that 25% of elemental damage from hits taken as chaos. I've said many times, we are a chaos inoculation build. We're immune to chaos. This chest armor reads, delete 25% of elements. That's what this reads.
Right.
Delete it. It's gone. Doesn't exist. This, importantly, gets around the usual restriction that this game has, where there's a line in the sand that no matter how good you are, you cannot reduce damage taken beyond 90%. 90% is the maximum amount of resistance you get. 90% is the maximum amount that armor and other physical damage can reduce your incoming damage. This gets around it.
Okay.
We are taking less than 10% of damage because that initial hit is first reduced by 25%, and then we get 90% damage reduction on top of that. So this is enormously potent for hits. Obviously, things like Ignite, you do want to try and get ailment immunity. That's another big defensive feature of the build. Ailment immunity is great. There are a variety of ways of doing ailment immunity. You can get it from different flasks and pantheons and stuff. The reason that I go all the way to Storm Shroud, which is full elemental immunity if you can get shock immunity. The reason I do that is because this applies not just to the big three, shock, ignite, and then chill freeze. It also applies to the alternate elements, and I do like to do simulacrums. So simulacrums are the delirium pinnacle content, and they come with the three alternate elements of scorch, brittle, and sap. Those are a lot harder to get immunity to, so I just go all the way for ailment studs. That's personal preference. If you're not doing simulacrum, you can just get ignite, shock, and then chill freeze. Like do the Brian King Pantheon.
Aside from using a mage blood with a flask that has a shock avoidance on it, what are the other avenues to get ailment immunity that you would recommend?
So I've done a lot of build crafting in the past week or two. So I've probably done the following thing in POB 15 times in the last week. Load up a pair of boots, add a modifier, essences, deafening essence, avoid shock between 55 and 60%. Then add Eldritch Influence, add Exarch and Eater Influence, and select as my Exarch implicit the third tier shock avoidance. If you use Blessed Orbs to get that value maxed out, and potentially Divine Orbs on the Essence, God, I hope we don't have to do that. Sometimes you do. You can add up to 100% chance to avoid shock on just your boots. One suffix, one implicit, and then you throw Storm Shroud at it, and that's one of my favorites. Storm Shroud can be expensive, so that may be more an end game option, but that's a great way to go. If you don't want to waste money on either the essences or the mid-tier Eldritch crafting currency, that modifier, Avoid Shock, is also as an Abyssal Jewel modifier. So pre-Mage Blood, it's a no-brainer to go with a Stygian Vice belt, because you get a jewel to go along with the belt. And, pardon. That means that you get all your normal 6 belt modifiers before going, Mage Blood. You get some energy shield, some strength, resistance, and then you get this too, which you can get whatever you want. Well, if you don't want to get the more expensive boots that you have to spend deafening essences and grand Eldritch Embers on, then you can just get one of those things, or you can get low tier that has another chunk of like 30 or 40% chance to avoid shock. Get yourself up and over 100%, and then that jewel can have other good stuff on it too. Obviously, I'm not the only schmuck out there who knows this trick, so jewels that have shock avoidance, life, and like resistances, yeah, those will be a little expensive. So just take what you can get. Take shock avoidance and something else cool. See what you can find on trade, and that's a cheap way to do it.
Okay.
Storm Shroud may not be cheap, but
yeah, right. Depends. It really depends. It depends on where we're at in the league.
Definitely.
So what else did you want to go over as far as obviously a melding of the flesh in here? This reads, because this confused me at first too. The elemental resistances are capped by your highest maximum elemental resistance instead, but the downside of it is it gives you negative elemental and negative maximum elemental. See, I thought that all you had to do when I first read this, I thought all you had to do was get 1 to 90. I didn't realize that you have to get all of them to 75 in order for it to jump all the way to 90.
Yeah. So the good news, I guess, the new players who have followed Pox's guide for Righteous Fire will understand at least half this jewel intuitively, because the Chieftain has the node that is one of the big reasons that you do that class for Righteous Fire that sets all of your maximum resistances equal to the fire one. The confusing part, as you say, may be this negative resistance and max resist that's on this jewel. This is a big hurdle to overcome. You need to be able to get a lot of extra resistances. I don't know off the top of my head. I had it written somewhere, so I apologize that our numbers off the top of my head. But you have to get like over 150, over 200 of each resistance to get yourself from negative 77 roundabout on the jewel. There's different roll ranges, but minus 77, and then the negative 60 from the campaign that you get, and then another 75, and then another 15 to get up to 90. So that's a lot, and that's the biggest thing. This is the reason that I have the build guide plateau with Singularity and a non-nebulous version of the build, because it's really hard to gather up all the gear to get all these extra resistances and max resistance, because you have to get a total of 19 max cold resist to make this work. The 15 to go from 75 to 90, and then overcoming at least the -4, maybe even more if you got a worse roll on the jewel. So yeah, it is a lot of investment, but the trade-off is that this is giving you both offense and defense. Again, remember, this is what's enabling the Nebulous Scepter to give you 600% increased damage for overcapped lightning and cold resistance. Plus, you have 90 all resistances. That's an awesome defensive layer.
Yeah, right.
I wish all my builds could have.
For sure. So what else? Let's see what else you got here, dude. Are there any other like key points of defense that you might want to go over?
Honestly, that's the big stuff. Like, get yourself to max block and spell block with glancing blows. I did have to take a determination block chance Watcher's Eye, but there's other ways of doing that. You can sacrifice some points on the tree and fiddle some things around. Block with Aegis Aurora is a huge defense. Incandescent Heart, Melding the Flesh, huge part of the defense. I think that's the main strokes.
Sick. Cool. Well, yeah, man, we could just, we've been going for like an hour. This is the longest one I've done so far. So
I'm sorry, that's on me.
No, I'm not. I'm totally, I love talking about this stuff. I really do. I really love this game. I love how nuanced and how different everybody approaches things. Like, it's cool. It's like watching, like you brought it up multiple times, but it's like watching an artist paint, and it's very, very cool.
It sounds. Listen, I'm super cognizant of how conceited that makes me sound. Like, believe me, no one is more aware of me that makes me sound like a conceited asshat. And it's just a metaphor. Please don't, nobody read too much into that. I don't see myself as like an artist painting on the canvas.
Well, you're not wearing you're not wearing one of those hats.
No, I probably got one around here somewhere, but no. It's a decent metaphor in the same way that, like, when people you talked about not wanting to follow a guide. The metaphor that I use that, like, again, it's just a metaphor. Don't read too much into it. But, like, that would be like saying you want to show up and take a physics exam having only ever read the textbook and not having a professor. And like, could somebody do it? I guess, but it's a lot easier if you have somebody teaching you. No, this is not as complex as physics. No, it is not as, artistically like as drawing and sketching. But like, if you know those things, this is the same general idea. Is all I'm saying.
Right, for sure. Cool, man. Well, hey, I appreciate you taking the time out and being on. Can you let
Appreciate you having me.
know? Yeah, for sure. Anytime, brother. Anytime you want to come on and talk about one of your builds. I'm going to start doing this. This is going to be like a regular thing that I'm doing now. So I'm very excited to see where it goes. I'm going to have everybody on that wants to come on and talk about builds. So
you've had some great people. I'm really impressed.
Yeah, to be honest with you, dude, I got very, very lucky, dude, that I've had the people I've had on so far. They were very, very gracious in coming on, because I'm a small channel, dude. They didn't have to do that.
Same.
So it was very, very cool.
Same here. Mm-hmm.
But let people know where they can find you and how they can support your channel.
Yeah, no, look, this is something I do as a hobby. My BuffaloBaron. I want to help new players. That's like, look, I'm not. At the moment, I'm not doing this as like a full-time thing. I'm here to help. I put out build guides and strategy and stuff. The way that people can support me is stop by. If it helps, just let me know what about it helped and what you like to see more of. I just want to help folks out.
Are you streaming on Twitch?
I don't stream regularly at this time. I've dabbled a little bit here and there. Got another kid on the way, so that's probably not on the horizon.
That's awesome.
Appreciate that. Yeah. So I foresee it being a little hard to get a regular streaming schedule down, but I do try to get out several video guides of different sorts in a league, and always appreciate people stopping by. Oh, just wanted to give a shout out to Jorgen, who I also do a podcast with, Coffee and Chaos. So check out if you haven't before, Jorgen's channel too. We get together every once in a while and do a chat a little bit like.
Yeah, those podcasts are awesome, man. I love them. I watch them every time they come out. I'm trying to get him on at some point. I know he's a little bit busy, but cool, man.
Yeah, busy guy.
Awesome, brother. Well, here, I'll stop the recording. Thank you guys for watching another episode. I will be back on later on this week with another big creator. I'm trying to work that out right now, so stay tuned, because that's going to be pretty exciting. If you guys found that helpful at all, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, as always, don't forget about my guest. Please consider subscribing to his channel as well. It's a huge help to both of us, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.